or those sorts of large arcs that you want to create to help the team flourish.
So let's talk a bit about that, because we deal a lot with systems, technology, right? But also people and processes, right? So we often feel that the technology is the easy part, whereas the getting people on board to change and grow at that kind of pace is the harder thing. All right.
Hey, well, we always jump on top of each other. We always talk about this stuff.
Come on, Tom.
How about I told you were going to say it. I'm going to say something. All right.
All right. Take it away, Tom. Take it away.
I'm going to take it away because that's who I am. This is Dr. Tom along with Alex Polamero, yet for another Stacked Scale episode. We're so excited. Before we move on to anything, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to everybody that's listening. Alex, to yourself and your family, as well as our guest, as we're going to introduce them. But we're recording this right before Christmas, and so we're all excited. End of the year, all sorts of good stuff going on. But as I always call Q4 is like my pre-Q1. So we started getting ready for 2026. Alex, why don't you take it away and get us our guest on board?
All right. Yeah. You got it. Happy holidays, everybody. So Marc Rosenkoetter, thank you, buddy, for being on with us. I've known Marc for, almost 30 years. We have been close friends. We've been business colleagues. We've worked on all kinds of fun projects together. Marc is hands down a brilliant business person and a fantastic friend. So Marc, I'd love for you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your experiences in professional services, and then we're going to dive into what it takes to grow a professional service practice. What are some of the change management issues that you've had to deal with, and how has that impacted philosophies and some of the tactical approaches to really scale an organization, which you've done many times. So we appreciate you being here, buddy.
Happy to be here, Alex and Tom. Thanks for having me. My background is not the standard professional services background. When you think of the accounting firm person who gets their accounting degree and rises through the ranks with the hope of one day making partner, I was almost the antithesis of that. And Alex, you can attest, we were in undergrad and it was very much why would we go into the workaday world? Everyone's doing that, and that seems like a drag. I don't want to work like normal people. Life's too short, and had these idealistic goals of what our professional lives would be like. So I decided to be an entrepreneur, and the first act of my career was 14 years, almost 13, 14 years. Starting and running from idea and inception to the first $1 million in revenue of 3 different businesses over that stretch of time. And ultimately, at that point, and what shifted me towards a more traditional workaday world was this. I had a girl I was, as many stories start. There's a girl I was dating, and she saw me as full of potential, but wanted a little more actual, a little less potential. So I took the opportunity and the hint, and shifted gears out of my entrepreneurial world, where I had all the risk. I mean, it's not like a slice of the risk pie. I ate the whole risk pie for breakfast, and instead switched into a job in professional services. I spent a short stint at the Coca-Cola company, and then went into management consulting. And I really found myself in that first. So this is now the second act of professional services in my career, and I spent the first number of years there where I not only learned enterprise management consulting, but I found my entrepreneurial tendencies ooze into the work, where I became more interested in the business of professional services than necessarily the personal myself delivering the professional services. And obviously I had to learn that and be proficient in that as well. But ultimately that led to where I think a lot of this conversation will linger on is my time at Aprio, which is a top 25 or top 20, I don't know where they are these days, accounting firm in the country, where I had the great opportunity to lead advisory. So tax, audit, advisory, wealth management. I guess some people would put CAS as a fifth bucket. But I led the advisory division of the firm through really the inflection point of growth for the firm. And so we'll get into some of the other pieces as we go. But that time period, I think the firm quadrupled in size as a whole, but my division 10x'd in that same time. So I led the fastest growing division of the fastest growing accounting firm in the entire country per accounting today. And that
And
was
what was that time frame like, Mark? When you say 10x, what was the time frame?
4 years.
Yeah. So there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, big
That was
slacker.
fast.
Yeah, slacker. So half of that was inorganic. So to be true, we were very acquisitive, and Aprio continues to be to this day, long after I've left, acquisitive. But the other half of that was organic growth. And with those two large forces coming together, there was a big chunk of this that was, how do you integrate a culture and create standardization and process and help people understand where they are. I think people want to touch the bottom of the swimming pool, like know that they have a steady place to start from. And when there's that much change and that much growth in an organization, both firm-wide and within the division and advisory, it can be really unsettling if you don't have the solid base to start from. And so a lot of what I did, I did a lot, but one of the things I did was to help create that sense of who are we, where are we going, why are we doing this, what's it mean for me, how does it impact my career, those sorts of large arcs that you want to create to help the team flourish.
So let's talk a bit about that, because we deal a lot with systems, technology, right? But also people and processes, right? So we often feel that the technology is the easy part, whereas the getting people on board to change and grow at that kind of pace is the harder thing. What was your experience with that, and what were some of the change management challenges you faced?
Yeah, I'd say that most growth pain isn't operational, it's identity based.
Yeah.
Change failures happen because people are being asked to change who they are, not just what they do, and that creates a ton of friction. And so I think there's kind of four different buckets I'd put this into when I was thinking about this conversation. One is early on, and I would say when I picked up the business, it was a many millions, but not in the tens of millions where we ended with my division. But early on, the firm or the division is the founder, or in my case, is the leader of the division. And growth requires moving from personal heroics to institutional capability. And honestly, I think I did a terrible job at this.
Okay, we want to hear about that.
But it's this. There's a hurdle tied to this of like letting go of the bottleneck, of being the bottleneck without being irrelevant. And I felt, and I could make the case for why I did what I did while I was there, that there were so many mission critical things that I wasn't permitted to delegate. And I could give you a litany of everything from compensation and bonuses and performance reviews I had 20 something directs at the end of that. And no one personally wanted to have a layer inserted between me and them to make my life more sane. There's diligence on inbound firms for every firm that we merged in and merged up. There were 10 or more that I looked at and did significant diligence on. And that's not just doing diligence on the operations and processes, but it's flying out to wherever the firm is and getting to know the people and building relationships. And I found it very hard to delegate some of those tasks where a properly staffed and structured group looks at this like, hey, we have to get to institutionalized capacity, rather than Mark, go above and beyond and work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to get it done. And that's a big change lever for me in my role, like as the leader of the group. I think there's other levers that aren't necessarily so founder focused, but just to speak to that founder leader role, it's a really tough piece to navigate.
So why is it? And Tom, I'd love for you to jump in here, because we see this a lot where even in organizations that are smaller, where you have an owner or maybe a couple of partners, right? Where they have a very difficult time delegating, right? Everything is the owner is responsible for everything, which actually makes the valuation of that business much lower when they go to exit or transfer the business at some point. So why is it that people have such a hard time delegating, and how do you overcome that? Tom, you've been doing it for 35 years and worked with numerous companies that Oracle just passed you along and said, go make this profitable, right?
Yep.
What did you find? And then Mark, I want to hear what you found. How did you do it?
Well, what's interesting, Alex, I think just yesterday, right, we were talking to an owner of a very, very small company, and she kept bringing up the quality aspects of delegation, meaning it's like, I know what it is that I want to have happen. I have certain standards. I am a perfectionist. And by definition, no one else can do my job. So this delegation thing that you guys keep talking about, I just don't see it happening. So I think that's one of those things that comes to mind. Mark, what do you see?
I mean, clearly service firms are built on trust and relationships, bar none. Yeah. But scaling requires codifying judgment without commoditizing the expertise. I think there's a fear that process will dilute quality, to use your word. And this the understanding is that no, adding process to the business actually improves quality and creates the opportunity to delegate, because by taking what's in there is special sauce in whatever someone's narrow expertise is in the application of accounting or advisory or audit, whatever it may be. But the process aspects, or the part where there's anything that's judgment based that can be turned into structured analysis for others, can really make a big difference. A relatively banal process that I helped with at my role in Aprio was client acceptance. Super painful. It's a big, high administrative burden. You'd say it doesn't add a lot of value, meaning you're not billing for that time from the firm's perspective, and the client doesn't even know it's happening. But it's a very important part of making sure you're bringing in appropriate clients. And I was getting swamped in emails, and I was constantly, hey, did you look at this? Did you look at this? And so I put a process in with a system and an approvals queue and delegation of certain responsibilities at certain thresholds, and implemented all of this. And then, because I was the person running the organization, I was able to also enforce the use of it. So when someone would say, did you sign off on my client acceptance form? I'd say, well, my queue is empty, so I'm done. And then they'd say, oh, I didn't put it in the queue. And I'm like, sounds like I have nothing to do then. And they had, by having that authority to help enforce the use of the process, I made everyone's life easier, not just my own, because I took this like tribal knowledge of who can review what and when, and what the levers are when reviewing client acceptance, and built the rule book by it, so that I could delegate to, hey, Alex, anything under $100,000, I can delegate to you in authority, but here's the decisions you're looking at that you're making, so that you weren't left hanging with, well, I don't know, do I accept it or not? There was actually something taken out of my brain that came from the compliance organization that went into the documentation that Alex could rely on, for example, to make those decisions.
Well, Mark, one of the things that I witnessed you do that was particularly unique, I think at least, was that you could think big picture about the strategy and how all these pieces would work, how we're going to grow the firm and get everybody on board. But you could get really granular into really specific systems that would enable all of that coming out of people's minds, right? Codifying what they know and putting it into systems. I feel like that's a lot of times hard for the same person, the one person, to do all that. Like, I can tell you, I don't think I'm good at both of those, right? I tend to be more the visionary, go get the business kind of person, less good at the systems kind of person. You're kind of like 2 in 1. But do you find that most people are like you, or they need somebody with that systems brain coming along there, like, other side of the brain?
I'd like to tell you I'm not special and that everybody can do it, and I can make a case that some aspect of it is able to be done by a lot of people. But in practice, in particularly in professional services firms, I have found people very narrowly focused on their area of expertise. And heck, we're trained for that through school and all of apprenticeship and everything else in professional services to like, you take this screwdriver. It's a Phillips head. You need a flat head. I don't have that. You are a Phillips head screwdriver, and you only turn that one screw over and over again. And when you say think laterally, to you don't even need a screwdriver. You need a drill or a socket wrench or whatever. They're just like upside down turtles, just sitting here saying I don't know what to do. And that's a growth mindset difference, and it's not. I think the profession in particular has almost selected historically for folks that are super deep experts, but very narrowly focused. And my entree into the accounting world from being an entrepreneur, where I was the chief cook and the bottle washer for for everything. I was, when everyone had a question, I was the buck stopped with me. I had to have the answer. And I think that forced me to a growth mindset that is, I believe, incredibly critical when it comes to scaling professional services firms. And so, Alex, I don't think I'm special, but I do think that set of characteristics are ones that need to be present and generally aren't in many, in like necessarily everyone by de facto.
Yeah, so that actually makes a lot of sense. Tom, what are your thoughts on that? Where, Mark came up into professional services out of being an entrepreneur and running an entrepreneurial enterprise for years and years before. It wasn't like straight from grad right into a firm, right? And be an accountant, right? You had a very different path. Have you seen that difference when people kind of come out of this entrepreneurial space versus maybe a more traditional professional service path?
Yeah, I mean, as a matter of fact, I mean, this harkens to my time at Oracle, where the culture there was very entrepreneurial, even though it was a massive company. And one of the interesting things about whether or not you would make it in that particular organization, which would be interesting to hear Mark do some color commentary on the following, which is there's an aspect of permission that I think sometimes seems to be so obvious to many, but yet there's many that miss it. For example, there are people that I met at Oracle and in other places where they were super smart and they had all these great ideas and all of that, but they felt like it wasn't their place, or they didn't have the permission to be, to think or to act or to even voice their opinion or their views on whether it be a vision or whether it be something that's smaller and granular, whatever it might be. And I think some of that, and I think, Mark, I'll sort of talk on your behalf. It seems like that particular of permission mindset was already in place when you took some of those responsibilities.
I absolutely was given a lot of autonomy, and I would say that many people are happy to have the autonomy as long as it works out in their favor. But the moment it doesn't work out in their favor, don't want to take accountability for the failure that comes with it.
What's the saying? It's failure has
right?
many.
So I was the analogy was I was given a very long rope, and whether I hung myself with it or did wonderful things with it was up to me. But I was absolutely held accountable. So I was given the opportunity to change things far and wide, but I was not absolved of making mistakes. They happen, and I had to justify and articulate that. There was a point where I made a shift from a data and analytics practice that had been largely focused on serving the internal uses of the firm, serving the internal needs of the firm to do the analytics work for it. And I said, no. I have the expense of these people, and I'm expected to drive revenue. I need them not to be doing non-billable internal work. I need them to be doing billable client work. So sorry, we'll do a wonderful, nice transition, document everything, hand it off to IT. They'll handle it from here, and I'm going to go do billable work with these people. And the feedback was, well, so you're asking me to double pay. I have to now have this team that isn't going to be billable, and then go hire a team that's going to do this internal work. How long are we going to do that? And I effectively mortgaged the team. I said, look, I will make sure that they are focused and billable and productive. And if they're not, then I understand that the outcome is more than likely my job and potentially their jobs as a collateral to it. Now, the shift happened at the end of a calendar year, and before the end of January, I had sold a $500,000 contract, or it was like a $400,000 contract that gave us the opportunity to keep everybody focused and billable, and that settled that. But I took a huge risk in understanding where the business was going, where I was seeing it to go, the opportunities that we had in the pipeline that I thought could close in the near term, all those things that you put in a cocktail shaker and pour out to say, I'm going to make a calculated bet, frankly, put some risk on the table to shift the organization to where it needs to be from where it was. Because if I hadn't done that, the team would have been my expense and still focused internally and not delivering any client revenue. Or client value and revenue.
Yeah, so you had that permission, but you still had the accountability, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
you have to have that.
Go ahead, Tom.
I get that part. No, I'm sorry. You have to have the accountability, and that goes without saying. And I think that may be a deterrent to give yourself permission to do those kinds of things. But I always tell entrepreneurs, and again, this is a podcast about scaling, right? Stacking the scale. I always say about the sort of that risk or that permission or whatever it is necessary but not sufficient. Right? So some people go, well, I'm afraid, or it's a risk and all that. I'm like, okay, if you want to get to the other side of this bridge, that's necessary. That scares. The feeling nervous or scared of risk or whatever, because if it wasn't, then everybody be doing it be easy. So again, necessary but not sufficient. Maybe, and there's a good opportunity here for us to transition into, if you agree with that statement, Mark, then what are the other things that you would need to make this scalability sufficient?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a great question. Again, there's a bunch of levers there. I think the biggest one and first one to note when it comes to professional services firms in particular is capacity management, the human capital component of it. Services firms live and die by utilization and timing of hiring folks, and under hiring burns out teams, over hiring kills margins. Demand can grow faster than delivery talent, and it becomes if you think about in the accounting and meaning tax and audit firms are a little different. They've got, for the most part, reoccurring clients for a decade or more, and they can really predict capacity fairly well. But in the advisory space, in non-recurring work, what we would visualize in a chart is the committed capacity of the team as a percentage of full capacity, but across time. So if time is your x-axis and y is your utilization, you'd say, well, I've got my team contoured or plugged into projects this far out into the future, and then you'll see this precipitous cliff. Literally, we called it the cliff, and it would be typically about 90 days out, and you're constant. And so as time marches forward, is the cliff coming closer to you, or is the cliff getting further away? And the distance of the cliff, how many days are you sold out of your team, helped give you some future vision as to what you needed to hire for. So I think capacity management is critically important. And if a firm is not looking at visualizing that cliff and understanding, man, the cliff's coming towards me, meaning I'm running out of pre-sold work and my team's going to be idle. That's a problem. I'm going to have to lay people off. Or the cliff's getting further away. I don't have the capacity to, especially if that goes above 100%, I don't have any slack in the chain way out into the future. I have the confidence now to go make some hires. And so that's a simple tool to help manage capacity, but it's critical from a tactical perspective to enable scale is managing the people component of it.
What have you seen?
I have others as well, but that's the first one.
Yeah. What have you seen, Tom, with regard to the ability to forecast capacity? How good are firms at doing this?
Oh, they're terrible. That's the easiest question so far on this podcast.
Out of the whole thing.
and the reason is this, there's a human reason to it, right? We are terrible at forecasting and we're terrible at recalling the past. So putting a little academic slant on this, if you ever look at good surveys and assessments, they always ask you about your whether you're feeling or whatever is what's happening in the present, because that's really all we're good at doing, is really reporting back what we do in the present. And I think the idea of forecasting is, because I think that's really what we're talking about here, is very foreign at a human nature. I think having good tools and stuff like that to be able to do it is important, and kind of relying on what it is that you're looking for. But I agree that's been a challenge. I think hope all of a sudden becomes a strategy for some of those cliff dwelling, right? Because eventually something will happen. Again, what do financial people always say? Past performance doesn't indicate future performance, or which is also the case here as well. But Mark, going back to this, I guess I'm agreeing vehemently here on that portion. What would be another component? Again, people are listening to this, kind of resonating. What would be another area for that people might be able to connect to?
Yeah, I've got 3 or 4 others. One I would share is knowledge transfer, meaning from a scale perspective, expertise lives in everyone's head, and without deliberate systems, every new hire resets the learning curve. Shadowing, while being the apprenticeship model, is ubiquitous and really great for building relationships and effective. It doesn't scale. And so at some point you hit a point where it's like, I don't have time to teach you because I have to go deliver the work, and teaching you slows me down and there's too many deadlines to get it done. And so adding deliberate systems on how you manage delivery is very important to ensuring pulling the expertise out of someone's head, chunking it into smaller pieces that can be delegated to very specific roles within your team. And that leverages the expertise stack from associate up through director or partner, whatever you have is in the top.
I would add a component to this that I'd like you to address, which I think it falls on deaf ears, which is, let's say there's a process that's good. People like, yeah, that thing, they all kind of agree. There's no real good definition of what good means, but everybody kind of agrees that this process is good. And it's good for 5 people. So there's an assumption that it will then be good for 500 people. And my view of it is that size does introduce complexity, right? So you can't take the same thing and just compound it. So this exponential growth that you had at Aprio of 10x, I have to assume you have some examples of exactly that.
Yes.
Yes, please provide one. How's that? Let me be clear on my question.
So
what's the story of that? Starting one way and having to shift dramatically as you grow.
Again, I'm focused mostly on the systems and processes that scale the organization rather than the delivery within any individual practice. So take these larger group-wide processes and you can scale them down to individual practices. But speaking broadly, I arrived and every single practice had its own engagement letter template in Word, Microsoft Word. there were 4 different contract management tools like DocuSign or PandaDoc or whatever across the firm. Legal had no source code control, so when they'd update the terms and conditions, they'd update them. But but when the partner or client representative would take the last client's contract and update the name and address and send it out, they never picked up those new terms and conditions from the lawyer. And all of that was manually, not centralized and painful. And there wasn't any ability for even that client representative to, they had to go hunt through emails to find all the information they needed. So there was pain for the service delivery client management person. There was pain in IT from multiple systems and wasteful systems that weren't being used. There was pain in legal. And I had no visibility into any of it as far as the ability to get it done. And that might work with a team of 5 people.
Ah.
But when you have a team of 150 people, and there's an expectation of reducing risk for legal and efficient use of IT dollars in procurement and systems and standardized processes that remove administrative burden for the team, and I want visibility into reporting without having to ask people to report for me, because that's time that they don't need to spend. I need self-service ability to get those reports. Thus began one of the larger initiatives that I implemented in my time there. Was I integrated our CRM to the contract management tool, which also included the e-signature component. So legal got source control over the contract templates. It was integrated into the CRM, so the CRM auto-filled the contract. The CRM was pre-populated because it was the email client was integrated. So every time someone sent an email, the CRM was updated, and they didn't have to go log emails and maintain that stuff. It just showed up there. So the ask was, instead of go find your old outdated Word document and go fill this out, it was click the create contract button in the CRM, and it jumped over to the CRM tool, or to the contract tool, pulled all the data out of the CRM, pre-populated, and it was ready to go with the current rate sheet and everything. And then I had a control point on who could sign the engagement letters. And that said, you couldn't sign using DocuSign or through your Word doc. It had to go through the system that legal had the control rights on the source template language. And so all of a sudden, IT had one software vendor. My team had less administrative burden because they clicked a button to generate it, and all the client information was current, accurate, and updated with pricing. And legal had the latest and greatest contract information, and I could build a report out of the CRM that showed all the sales that had happened. So I had, and separate from practice management of service delivery and billable hours and stuff, just on the contract side. Everybody wins. And that was important. I think you talk about change management, and finding the what's in it for me for each of those different stakeholders was a really important key to helping create quality control at scale, and creating leverage, and creating just the various tools and widgets you need to make this thing go faster.
Yeah, I use affectionate terms when I talk to clients like this. So I always ask them to tune in to WIIFM, which is a great station. Yeah. And then the other thing is, when you're talking about how these processes sometimes are wired to do the thing they weren't intended to do. Like in your case, it would be the risk propagation organization. Was how you started with some of those contracts, right? Where actually you've set up a system to ensure that the highest risk was an option. And I think sometimes people don't see it that way, where they're looking for flexibility or whatever the term you want to use, which in turn goes against everything they intended to do.
It starts small when you're a small team, and there is no need for source control because you are the source control. You don't have counsel that's updating your
Hmm.
T's and C's. It's a small committee and group of people doing it. There is no IT with multiple platforms. It's the one platform you pay for. You're a small team. You might have a CRM. You might not. I mean, you start when you're starting that small, it's organic, and
Hmm.
you get to a scale point that says, it worked for 5, it doesn't work for 500 or 50 or whatever the
Yep.
next scale point is. And that requires adding the systems and process, but if it's done appropriately, it's actually removing friction and enabling speed. And
Yeah.
that I think, yeah, I mean, if you were to say it in a nutshell, I'd say tactically scaling professional services firms is an exercise in reducing friction faster than demand grows.
I,
Wow, there you go. Yeah, yeah. And Tom, that's why a lot of times when if we come into an organization that is smaller and wants to scale, they have to have the technical systems and processes enabled to make that happen, right? And Mark, that's what you seem to have done. But we're also always looking for what you started with, which is a mindset. Like you said, growth mindset. You had a growth mindset and you were given enough permissions, or the organization must have had some mindset that enabled them to grow at that kind of pace, right?
Oh,
Like,
agreed.
because
Absolutely.
could you come into Aprio if you didn't? What was the mindset at Aprio? Like, if that, what I'm getting at is, if that mindset wasn't there, all the technical stuff in the world wouldn't have been able to help you scale. You have to have this mindset.
So it's the clearly that's set at the top, and Richard Kopelman was then and is still the CEO at Aprio, and credit to him, and I mean that in all sincerity, even though I'm no longer there. I mean, I really do give him a ton of credit for setting a growth mindset at the firm and making that part of the core DNA of it. Uh, if you're at a firm that doesn't have that growth mindset, if you have that long leash, you can still have a growth mindset within your little space of autonomy. I was fortunate that I had both. I had this air cover at the at my boss's level, the CEO's level, saying, we are a growth oriented firm. Then I walk in and say, we're going to grow. And here's how we're going to do it. He gave me the rope to grow the right way or fail. That was on me, but he gave me that opportunity. Now, then I went and took it and applied a variety of frameworks and methodologies to execute on the vision.
Yeah.
I,
Okay. So, and Tom, I think that's why we look for an owner, a partner, an executive team that has the mindset and is going from one phase where they now need systems and processes to go to the next stage, right? A lot more, they're going to bring in a lot more capacity. They're going to bring in a lot more business, right? And a lot of times, you're right, Mark, at a small level, they may not have a CRM, and we come in and build the CRM,
and
right?
I'll
But
tell you something. It's really hard to get there for people that are listening to it. We're sitting here talking like this happens all the time, and we know how to do all of this, right? But and I want to put 2 points right while we're talking about this. Number one, I think by now anybody that might be listening to this podcast would understand it, but I think it's worth explaining. Growth mindset is actually well defined, and if you're really interested on that, there's a book by Carol Dweck called Having Growth Mindset that I would suggest anybody pick up and read so you understand specifically what we're talking about here. But second, the things that are needed to scale are things that are not usually presently needed. And that's the hard part of institutionalizing a new process. Because let's say you're sitting here with the 5 people, like the proverbial 5 people we've been talking about, and now they've got this tribal knowledge, is what I call it, right? The stuff that is in their head and not in the system. And they're all like moving, like they're all dancing. It's all great, wonderful. And then you're going, okay, well, I'm thinking about hiring 10 more people. And for us to be able to hire 10 more people, there's this new process that we need to institute. And that point in reflection right there, it's like, well, this is a big drag because I don't need half this stuff. right? Because I already do this. Why are we doing this? And nobody can see that future, that vision when you need it, because obviously the best time to put that process in place is when you have 5 people, not when you have 50, right? And then all of a sudden
Well,
goes, this is all falling apart.
To pile on, it's particularly when it's a partnership, and there's money expended up front to implement the process, and the value is received later once you've scaled up to soak it up, and you're paying with your partnership dollars to do this the thing that will scale later. So you're betting on the future with today's dollars, and that is really hard for a lot of firms. And I think there's a really fine point to put into this, which is this isn't about heavy process or systems. It's about just enough to scale without breaking your culture.
Wow.
It's a so one of the things I picked up along the way is an certified Scrum product owner certificate, and this has been a decade now, but it's waterfall or agile are two different project management methodologies, but one of the pieces and one of the key components in agile, where it's typically used for software, but this principle kind of translates across that, it's have as little structure as possible that works, and only add incremental process and formality and ceremonies of meetings and whatnot as you need to. This isn't add ceremonies for the sake of ceremonies and meetings for because the process says to. There's a need for it, and it's the next step in it, and it's not a binary, we don't have a process, we do. It's this evolution over time and change, because you really don't hire all 10 of those new people overnight. You're going to go from 5 to 15 over the course of 12 months, and that 12 months is maybe over 18 months or 24 months. It takes a while.
You hear Tom making some crazy noises.
I do. There we go.
Tom, what are you doing? You playing with your soundboard?
No, my phone jumped in here, and I don't know how that happened. So.
But it was in my soul.
For everybody's listening or maybe watching on YouTube, I have some serious equipment over here. Okay, so you would be incredibly impressed if you saw it now. If I could use half of it, that would be pretty amazing too. Anyway, apologize for that.
Yeah. Well, hey, I want to kind of like bring it to close here. So, Marc, now that you've been doing this for quite a while, tell us what you're up to now, and then I'd love for you to say, like, if you had 2 or 3 things to share with our audience about how to scale professional services, what would you say, like in a nutshell? So tell us where you're at today, and then give us some kind of like, hey, these are some of the things I learned.
Yeah, so I think at the top of the call, we talked a bit about delegation and the importance of that. And one of the things, I said at that point in time in the conversation that I think I did a very poor job of that. I was on the fast track to burnout, and a large part of that is on me, and I own that to this day. And so I'm not in professional services anymore, and that was an intentional decision to honor my values personally, where it wasn't worth losing my family for the sake of my career. Sure. And so I changed paths. That's not a knock on Aprio. That's not a knock on all the things I achieved and learned and grew and did while there. Just for me and where I am, and I've got 2 little boys. They are now 6 and 8 years old. At the time, I guess they were, do the math in my head, I guess 5 and 3. Little kids that still think of me as their best friend, and I hope that never changes, but I'm told when they get to be teenagers it does.
Oh yeah, it'll change. Don't worry.
But for now,
it'll be fine.
So my total sidebar, my son literally this morning said, I don't want to go to college because I never want to move out. I always want to live with you.
Oh my goodness.
I mean,
nice.
Like, bottle that up.
I know. Now that you have a phone, record it. Right?
You got to record that. Yeah, my daughter says, I don't want to go to high school. I want to skip high school and go straight to college.
That day, I'm sure will come for me too. But so you were asking a question. So today, I run finance and operations for a small software startup. It's a 5-year-old company, but it's a software-based company out of the Silicon Valley area. And it's a high growth opportunity for me where instead of being on the professional services side, I'm company side, and it's challenging and exciting. And it's an area that I am not the software developer, particularly at the deep level of network algorithms that we work with. It's fascinating and well above my intelligence level. And so in this technology business, I bring the business component, and the majority of the rest of the team are the technologists who are brilliant at doing what they do. And so together we are building and running this. And so it's a wonderful ride right now, and we'll see where that leads. I'm depending on where that leads over the next number of years, who knows what my next act looks like. But for now, this is a very exciting role, and I'm excited and happy to be in it.
And what are like two key things besides delegation, two additional things that you learned in professional services that you would say to professional service firms that could also be used for other types of organizations like software?
Mm-hmm.
That
I'd say. I'd say I focused on and this sounds a little preachy, and I don't mean it as such. Take it at the more meta level if you don't mind. But I focused on teaching people how to think, not just telling them what to do. And that gets back to the growth mindset comment of talk. So we would get into budgeting, and let's say our practice X is doing 5 million a year, and I'd say, well, what would it take to do 50 million this year?
Yeah.
And I don't expect them to put 50 million on paper for the budget, but I want them to say what you're doing today might get you to 5.5 million. And if you're looking for 10% growth, good on you. But we're trying to grow demonstrably differently. What you're doing today won't work for that. What levers are we going to pull that could open up a 5 to 50? And those sorts of conversations for me weren't telling them what to do or how to get there. It was telling them, working with them and helping open their mind to the possibilities. It's how to think differently. So I think that was kind of the first one that comes to mind. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Well, we could talk all day about that, how to think differently, right? Well, Marc, we want to thank you, man. Appreciate you coming on. And what do you got? You got something else? He disappeared. He left like mic drop, right?
Yeah, I guess it's over.
I guess, yeah, there you go. I hope everything's okay. But I think you could leave on that note, right, Tom, that think differently.
That's it. Well, think in general, right? I think that might be a thing. Sometimes people just act on what they know, and there's more to know.
And as AI comes into this world, and we'll talk more about that, right? I think we're going to need more thinking, more the thinkers, right? Because AI is trying to take the doing and make it very replicable and faster and simpler and lower cost, whereas the thinkers, right, they're still costing organizations. We're bringing them in, all that kind of stuff. So we'll see where. Yeah, I gotcha. Well, we'll see how it shakes out. I'm going to stop right now. Thank you, Marc, for being with us. Join us next time
everybody.
on Ninestone, Stack to Scale. See ya.
Bye. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe and turn on your notifications so you never miss an episode. Click here for more great content to help you scale smarter. If this episode was valuable for you, share it with a friend and drop a comment below. And when you're ready to scale, visit us at ninestonepartners.com. Until next time, keep stacking, keep scaling.